future, robots, technology, and a whole lot of money. Genlock is Rooster Teeth's newest series, which debuted on January 26, 2019. Rooster Teeth was really excited for this show to come out, constantly tweeting the people they got to be in it. That seemed to take precedent over anything else. I don't blame them, I know why. But did hiring so many top-tier actors make this new project a success? Let's find out. The year is 2068. The world is at war with each other, split into two factions, the Vanguard and the Union. We are introduced to our main character, Julian Chase, and his girlfriend, Miranda Worth. There's a nice scene with him and his family, but everything gets interrupted because the Union is attacking. This leads to a pretty cool dogfight sequence, which ends in Chase self-sacrificing himself for everyone. This leads his friends and family and all of his comrades to believe he is dead. That is, until 4 years later. A character by the name of Dr. Weller has been working on a project known as Genlock. The military wants to use his concept to fight against the Union. To use Genlock, however, you must be compatible with it. It's extremely rare, about 1 in a million chance to be compatible. Chase was compatible, and so after his accident, Weller and his team retrieved his body and hooked him up to the program where he became the first person ever to use Genlock. For the past 4 years, they've been training and getting a better understanding of it. Weller and his project are moved to the Anvil base where they recruit and test new Genlock users. Drama ensues between him and Miranda because she thought he was dead, and we get the rest of the Genlock crew. The next few episodes are dedicated to the training, getting used to their new robot bodies, and building the bond within the crew. That's really the main focus for the first 5 episodes. Things are pretty laid back. The show really wants you to bond with the characters before anything else, which I can appreciate. Plot does happen, there's this other mysterious Holon running around tormenting our characters, but things, I would say, really take a turn in episode 6. It's revealed that the enemy Holon, nicknamed Nemesis, is Chase, the original Chase, which had nearly died 4 years ago. They sent him on a mission where he was captured, turned, and now he fights for the Union. The Chase we've been following has been a copy of the real one. His mind was backed up and saved before he went on the mission, and so they uploaded that to his vacant body. Really cool concept. Then the Union attack the Anvil, they launch an ambush, and they claim a victory. Weller self-sacrifices himself, and our main crew abandon the base. Now, the season could have ended there, to be honest. I think it would have made for a pretty good place to stop. But it keeps going, so far that we wind up at a new facility, Artasa, replacing Weller with his ex, and being introduced to Mark Holcroft, who is the man who is the primary investor in the ESU, the science unit. The priorities seem to be a little off in terms of giving the audience information. The Union at this point are still a faceless, motivationless entity that exists as the world's problem. There's no information given to us about them, our main villain, yet I know the man who's investing into Genlock. Why? So we have a new base and the goal becomes to kill Nemesis. The whole last episode is dedicated to taking him down, which they do. And that's the extremely basic version of the plot. If you've watched the show, then you know how much I just skipped over, but I wanted to get the basics out there. Now, prior to this show coming out, the advertising was already kind of weird. There was a lot of cryptic things Rooster Teeth decided to do. Like the Union took over the Twitter account for a little while. That was weird. But of course, interviews come out as well. The creators, the actors would promote it, talk about it. The way it was pitched seems incredibly different to what we got. They talked about it like there would be this focus on the human identity and losing it, which ended up being a lot more literal than expected. And it was pitched as though it would explore that. I think it's pretty obvious what it was going for. Like, you can see all of that there, but they never did anything with it. In an interview with IO9, they asked Michael B. Jordan, why does he think stories like this are appealing to audience despite having been around for the past 60 years? And he says, it's that classic story about two sides fighting for what they believe in. Stories about oppressed people rebelling against their tormentors speak to people because we've all dealt with that at some point in our lives. We like seeing these stories told over and over again because you can always try to see things from the opposing characters' perspectives and come out sympathizing with them. And so we just want to keep trying, I think, to see all of those various perspectives. Great answer. I very much agree with it. The problem is season 1 is not that. It does not give you the perspective of the other side. It seems like the pitch he was given for the grand scale, not season 1. And that's really the crux of Genlock right now. The cast and writers talk about all these really cool, interesting, moral, philosophical, ideological concepts that the show has, but ultimately the show doesn't have them. They're ideas that weren't done well in season 1. Things like Chase not being the original. This was a plot point that hardly seemed to mean anything. It was a really cool concept that at first seems like it's going somewhere, but very quickly doesn't. Moments after it's revealed, Chase denounces him and decides that he's not him, or he just doesn't care. And Weller dies, so he can't do anything. The main group of characters have no sort of emotional connection to the original Chase, so it's not like they care too much. The only other person it affected was really Miranda, and at first it does seem like there is conflict within her. She questions which Chase is her Chase.
How am I supposed to know what we are if I don't even know what you are?
Miranda.
If that thing that just attacked us is also you, then which one of you is my Chase? Both? Neither? Or did my Chase die 4 years ago?
And this lasts right up into the final episode. To save her friend, she comes out of her mech and she risks her life because she's banking that her Chase won't hurt her, which he doesn't.
Julian! Why are you doing this?
And that's where it ends, because moments later they straight up kill him. And then after the battle, Miranda says how he died 4 years ago.
I don't think it was just my Chase I lost the night the war started. I think both those people, that Chase, that Miranda, were casualties. It's just been playing out in slow motion ever since.
Now you've confused me almost immediately, and you promised me you weren't going to do that.
But that seems to go against what just happened. If he died 4 years ago, then it wouldn't be her Chase and he'd have tried to kill her. But he stopped because there's still something within him that doesn't want to hurt Miranda. So this concept is just left ignored. She just accepts it. So it makes for a very bland resolution for her character. Continuing on the ideas that weren't done well, the Union. The Union may very well be the biggest hindrance holding this season down. In a fictional future filled with fictional characters inside of a fictional war, Genlock fails to establish the war that is happening. It could be forgiven had the story taken place in World War I or World War II or any actual war that took place in reality and has historical record. But when the war is entirely made up, it's important to establish the sides that are fighting and why they're fighting in it. This is a global war we're talking about. Millions of people on both sides fighting for their cause. So when the show hides the Union's cause, you don't get invested. You only have one side of a story, a side that's incredibly biased. Gray has said in an interview that he wanted to focus primarily on the protagonists for season 1, which isn't a problem. The problem was a motivation was never established. We didn't need to follow the Union's perspective for a few episodes. We just needed to know what was happening and why it was happening. I think the perfect place for this would have been in episode 1, when that lady was addressing everyone and the Union attacked. I think that'd have been the perfect time to have told the audience what the hell the Union is and what they stand for. I mean, in current day, the war has been going on now for at least 4 years. How could they possibly explain who the Union are without it feeling incredibly awkward? Who needs a war explained to them 4 years into one? Unless you're a child, but why would you explain a global war to a child? The Union's motive just seems to be world domination, which ends up being very boring. Here's a statement that I believe summarizes the villain's effect on the overall story. The heroes are only as good as the villains they're against. If the villains are boring and generic, then the story's gonna wind up that way as well. The best matchup isn't good versus bad, it's ideology versus ideology. It seems like the show has it, but just refused to use it, and because of that, you ended up with a very standard plot. There are those people who say, oh, it's good we don't know anything about them. You can theorize and discuss them. And I think those people are stupid. Theory should be left up for the twists and unexpected turns that are already unlikely to happen in the first place. You shouldn't have to theorize about something so basic. Not everything was like that though. While the plot is nothing special, the characters carry the scenes. There are so many great moments between them. Kazu and Cammy, Chase and Yaz are great in practically every scene they're in together. Episode 7 was one of my favorites. It's an incredibly slow episode, and you really feel like these people are starting to bond emotionally. That scene where Val was playing the guitar because she learned it through Kazu was so relaxing. It's an odd word to use, but it's an appropriate one. It's moments like these that keep the series entertaining above all else. So let's talk about them individually. Valentina's an extremely eccentric character. She likes to party. She used to be a special op, but she's done with it and she just wants to dance until the world ends. She's very cynical and often rude, and that's pretty much the gist about her. Her and Kazu are probably the two least developed characters, just being given basic character traits and attributes about who they are, which is fine. The thing about Val, however, is she's introduced as someone who's decided she's done with everything. She's fought, she's tried to end the fighting, but the fighting continues anyway. So she says she's done. She doesn't owe the world anything. She was willing to help with some scientific junk she thought Genlock would be, but she didn't want to be on the battlefield. And I think that's cool. She's not some altruist. She's very much concerned for herself and herself only. The problem I have is that doesn't last very long. I don't have a problem with her converting back to deciding to help others again. It's the way it did it. It took very little convincing. Having fought in battles, having fought in enough to have decided you're done with it, you'd imagine she'd have a pretty clear picture of war, what's at stake and what's to be lost. At one point, she practically says she doesn't care. She believes humans to be a certain way, that no matter what happens, nothing will ever change, and so she's just accepted that.
War never changes anything. People themselves are the problem, and more fighting won't alter that. I've done my bit. Let the world tear itself apart. I'm going to live it up while I can. I'm going to leave a beautiful corpse, an open bar tab, and no regrets.
And Chase gives what could barely be considered a speech, a very generic one that broadly says how she'll regret not helping.
You're gonna go live it up like there's no tomorrow, which is gonna make sure there's no tomorrow. I can guarantee you'll have one last regret as the Union Nano hits wherever you've been partying at. You'll think, maybe I could have changed this. And I didn't.
And it acts as though she never thought of that. Anyway, later on, they all enter their Holons. There's another scene where a whole bunch of injured civilians get off a medvac, and that's supposed to have really convinced everyone to help. It makes sense for mainly Cammy, who's never been in a war, but Val, she's like a seasoned veteran. At this point, she has to have seen this before. They set her up to have her own set of ideals, and it really just didn't do a good job at explaining them away and why she would change her mind. It seemed very poorly done, if you ask me. I guess it's also important to note that she's gender fluid. How important is that? Not really, but the show makes a big deal about it. There's this whole long drawn out scene where Cammy knows, but she doesn't want to explain it to Kazu, and she lets Val explain it herself to him, and the whole time it was going on, I couldn't help but think, why is this happening? Why is an entire scene being dedicated to something that very easily could have been an offhanded comment that wasn't a big deal? Because it isn't. It really just seems like they're trying to earn brownie points with the audience. The banter that continuously happens through the series, mainly teasing Kazu, does make for entertaining character interactions. There just doesn't need to be a scene dedicated to it. For a show that Gray likes to promote as having casual diversity, this was probably the exact opposite as to how it was supposed to be done. I think she is going to change her gender at some point. One season, she's just going to be a man all of a sudden. The technology probably really helps her with it, and I think that'd have made for an overall better reveal on top of whatever subtleties could have been sprinkled in. But it seems like they made a very obvious scene for a very obvious reason. Also, no one uses video games like this. No one treats an avatar they use as a true internal reflection of who they are. Some people just want to stare at an ass.
Speaking of butts, your character's ass is exposed.
I decided if I was going to stare at a Mass Effect 2 character, for 60 or 80 hours, I wanted it to be something enjoyable, so I made my character look like Taylor Swift.
I will add her ether look is much better than her real look, mainly because her real look looks like Sombra. I don't know how anyone in the creative team thought that no one would draw that comparison. Maybe change the colors, but everyone thinks this. It really hinders her design because all anyone thinks about is someone else. So Val's male ether look is at least unique. Kazu, the Japanese military operative. I have the least to say about him. There's not much presented about him. His high energy and always ready to fight personality is fun to watch, but aside from that, there's not much to say. Cameron McLeod, everyone's new favorite waifu. She's the hacker and the technology expert. She's got a foul mouth and the viewers love her for it, and I'll be honest, I do too. Macy Williams does an incredible job at bringing a lot of high energy to this character. Her naivety when it comes to war and combat was noticeable, but does not directly get called out, which was great to see. She didn't enter the show as an expert in combat, so when Sinclair starts killing people, she started freaking out a bit. A lot of effort seems to go into her body language and posture in comparison to the others. Even the way she sits in a chair is a minor detail, but it plays off who she is. It's giving you more about her without directly having to call out anything. It's these small things I appreciate. Anyway, like I said, she's extremely likable and has some really great character interactions with Kazu. These two have the best chemistry amongst everyone. It's incredibly believable and just fun to watch.
So let the good time roll.
Julian Chase, the main character of the series. You really wouldn't know that just by watching. Chase is a very boring character. He's exactly how you'd expect a hero of a story to be. He's altruistic, he's much more concerned with the well-being of the people over himself. And that's not inherently bad. Some of the greatest characters of all time are like that, but there's hardly any depth to him. He gives a lot of speeches, but they're so broad and generalized that it doesn't feel like a person is saying it. It's like it's trying to make quotes that people will remember, but the delivery winds up boring. Most of Chase's lines hardly seem to hold any sort of emotion. Despite being described by the creator as charming and likable, the show doesn't do a good job at displaying that. I know Michael B. Jordan is a good actor, so I can't help but think the script or the directing wasn't in Chase's favor. It also doesn't help that he wasn't affected by the Nemesis's existence. That might have been capable of bringing out more of Chase's emotions and conflict, but it doesn't happen. I don't have much else to say about him other than he was incredibly bland and boring to watch. In complete contrast to Chase, you have Dr. Weller. Now, I wasn't a fan of David Tennant going into this, and by that I mean I hadn't seen him in anything, so I wasn't attached to his name, but I'll be damned if he doesn't steal the show. It seems like a lot of effort went into making him as likable as possible, and I'm sure a lot of that credit goes to his voice acting. But even his dialogue. I harped on Chase for giving some pretty generic, lackluster speeches, and that's partly because Weller has all the good ones. Having two characters compete for speeches does not end well. And I like Weller's outlook on things, because it's not the average way heroes think. He's not preaching that he'll save the world or it's their turn to end it. He really preaches the idea of simply making a change. And I like that. It's similar yet different to concepts I'm continuously posed with in these types of shows. And it's really too bad that he died, because in a show like this, you want those characters who have different outlooks and ideologies and to sort of hold them up for at least a little while. But now we got Chase, so... Yasmine Madrani. I want to marry this woman because she is so goddamn good this season. As funny and as much waifu material Cammy is, as weirdly exotic as Val is, as noble and strong as Chase is, Yaz surpasses all of these characters, not only in the way she acts and carries herself, but also because she has a whole range of emotions the series isn't scared to give her. She's set up as this former Union soldier who's now decided to fight for the other side, yet despite knowing how that might be a problem, it never is. Her being former Union never gets in the way of the mission, or if it does, it's not of her own doing. She's very understanding that being former Union can cause a little controversy, and she plays it off very well. And this also leads into how much of a total badass she is. You don't fuck with Madrani. When shit hits the fan and it's fight or flight, she'll kick ass until the end. She's a total badass, and yet despite being that, she's also shown to be the most caring. You can call it love or whatever you want, but even if it's not, it's incredibly believable that she cares for Chase and his well-being. That scene in episode 7 where she's consoling Chase, trying to make him feel better, was a great moment for her. That whole episode is actually really amazing and well done. Yasmine covers the two most extreme spectrums of emotion, badass and loving. But those aren't the only reasons that I love Madrani so much. You see, this season did something that I can't believe I'm capable of saying this sincerely and honestly. They did subtlety. I know, I can hardly believe it either. I am of course talking about Yaz's haul-on. Now, I don't consider myself culturally knowledgeable when it comes to the majority of the world. Sure, I know some pretty basic stereotypical things about certain countries that likely don't represent them very well. When I think of Scotland, I think of bagpipes and kilts. Now, is that an accurate depiction of the country as a whole, representing their values and customs they hold? I doubt it, but you get the point. When each of the characters got their new and improved haul-ons, I understood each one of them to a fairly basic extent. As Miga said to Chase, he's a pilot, and so he's got a pretty generic body, but the wings represent his past. Val is this stealth operative, and so it's a lot darker and sleeker to help her when she wants to go incognito. McLeod has this weird obsession with rabbits. No, seriously, it's a bit much. It's kind of weird. Anyway, she makes hers a bunny. And Kazu, well, this comes back to the culture thing. As much as I don't know about Japan, Kazu plays on a lot of the stereotypes I'm aware of. The manga thing and the samurai, as his haul-on represents. But circling all the way back to Yaz, I did not know what her haul-on was. Everyone else's was pretty obvious, and so after researching a bit, you learn some new stuff. So Yaz's mech is reminiscent of an Iranian mythological bird called a huma. It's said that this bird never touches the ground and remains its entire life flying so high above the earth it can't be seen. In some variations, it's akin to a phoenix, where every few hundred years it would consume itself in the flames only to rise again. It's also considered to be a very compassionate bird, also referred to as a bird of fortune, as if its shadow touches you, good things will happen. That's about as safe as I feel spouting mythology I only recently took the time to get the basics of. I don't want to start getting things too wrong. And so if you didn't know that Iranian mythology, Yaz probably didn't make a lot of sense to you. And you know what? It's fucking awesome. Once you learn that aspect of her, you start seeing a lot more of the smaller things that were added, such as her necklace, which also looks like a huma in a more phoenix-like aesthetic, as well as Weller calls her little bird.
Time to fly again, little bird.
There are a lot of things that are sprinkled in, although I will say her call sign is huma, so that's a bit obvious.
Huma is waking up, taxiing to staging area 1.
But like I said, I didn't know what the hell that meant, so it was just a word. Being told the meaning and history and seeing how it was implemented into the series is exactly how it should be done. It shouldn't have to give you a history lesson about mythology. Some things are just left to simply exist. The animation either is or isn't a concern for you regarding the show. There's a noticeable frame rate the series has, which could be a problem depending on who you are. For me, it was noticeable, but after a few minutes I got used to it and it blended right in. It's only really a problem when things are moving slow, conversations are being had, they're talking, they're walking, basically any non-action scene. When there is action, frame rate is not a problem. And speaking of action, that segues neatly into the next topic. Genlock's action is really good. I consider it Rooster Teeth's best action they have in current day. Ruby is its most obvious competition, but I believe the action in Genlock is objectively better in terms of its animation, choreography, and cinematography, which, if all done right, create some really great action scenes. I loved the fights in the show. Even the dog fights, which tend to be my least favorite aspect of any sort of encounter, managed to pull it off because the cinematography was great. It wasn't just cut, cut, cut. We'd follow someone as they flew through the city. The camera would remain in one continuous motion, and it was really well executed. And those weren't even the good fights of the show. My personal favorite was when Sinclair went evil and Yaz and him duked it out. It was just awesome. But the main appeal is their mechs, and I'll be honest, the action still delivered. The sequences were amazing. Something I like to do is see how long the camera stays on a shot before cutting to a different angle, and there are many moments that just keep a shot going. Keeping an action scene rolling is important for spectacle action, unrealistic, hyperbolized choreography and movement that just wows an audience. When it goes for something like this, keeping a single shot going is vital to the fight's rhythm. The audience needs to be able to feel its rhythm the sequence is trying to make, and a surefire way to disrupt that is by cutting. It's like a martial arts film, extremely out there action that is meant to impress an audience with its choreography as opposed to its realism. Shots will stay on long enough for the audience to feel the rhythm, and I think Genlock does a great job with this. I think it's the best filmed action Rooster Teeth has as well. Sometimes the camera is just a camera, following a scene, making sure you see what it wants you to see. Other times it's first person, as though you are a projectile that's being launched at the enemy. Or it sometimes feels like you've taken up the viewpoint of someone on the ground, witnessing the destruction and chaos happen as if you were there. Point is that it feels unlike any other production Rooster Teeth has made. Whoever the animators are, there are a lot of them, who specifically worked on the action did an incredible job. They not only know how to animate a fight, but they know how to choreograph one, and an often overlooked one, they know how to film a fight. The more casual dialogue-centric scenes are nothing special. There's never really an opportunity for the camera itself to shine, but well done on the action, it was really good. In the end, Genlock has a great cast of characters who are extremely likable, for the most part, and play off each other really well. The action in this series I think is Rooster Teeth's best in current time. However, the promise of more philosophical and ideological themes fail to reach the surface. The villains are never given any sort of motive, making it very hard to get invested into the war that is going on. And certain individuals fail to make you invested altogether. There are many good things this season has going for it, but its problems lie in its much larger aspects. And because of that, I can't help but say that Genlock Season 1 is average.